Good evening. Thank you all for coming out this evening to the keynote presentation for the third annual Simply Healthy Creating Sustainable Communities, Simply Living Fair and Wellness Expo. We are grateful to a lot of people, but I want to say thank you to the people who have helped to bring this together, and that's Lucille, Scarlett, Maggie, and Donna, and a bunch of other people who shall remain nameless. It was, as I said, 3 years ago that we came up with this idea to have a Simply Healthy Fair because we think that it's essential for people in our community to have a better understanding of the possible resources available here in the community to help in creating more sustainable, healthy lives. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say, except now I would like to invite up Lucille Bertuccio, who is the co-founder and president of the Center for Sustainable Living, which is an umbrella organization over many different projects, and she'll speak of them. And one of them is my project, Green Dove, which is the parent of the Indiana Holistic Health Network. And so thank you again.
Hi, it's great to see all of these friendly faces out here. I think I recognize quite a number of people. The Center for Sustainable Living was actually founded by 3 women in 1990, and I'm here, and there's another one in the audience somewhere. I can't see her right now, but Christina Glosser. She was really the brains behind the organization. And the organization is actually a grassroots, local, membership-driven, small organization, totally volunteer. And what we do is we offer the opportunity for Bloomingtonians to come up with the ideas that will help us to be sustainable. And they have come up with these wonderful ideas. We had a housing group that put in the straw bale house here in Bloomington. So there are now opportunities for you actually to go, and if you want to build a straw bale house, and some people have actually opted to do something like that, or at least retrofit their house to be straw bale, you can do it now in Bloomington. So, and Joe and Jean Davis are in the back there listening to this too. We also have Siren, which is Southern Indiana Renewable Energy Network, which is helping us to become energy efficient and use solar and wind, even in Indiana. We have the Bicycle Project, which helps people to understand bikes, how to put them together, how to maintain them, and are all volunteer. They're all totally volunteer. We just became a certified city. Bloomington is now the 27th certified city in the United States that is a wildlife habitat. And that took us quite a long time to get that particular designation. Thank you. We have an animal sanctuary as part of our group. We have Oasis, which is a local community garden. We have a young woman in the audience also, Jamie Reed, who's going to work with schools to get them to build an edible Eden in their own backyards, in their own schoolyards. So we've got plenty of different kinds of activities and I'm sure I missed a few of our wonderful projects, but you can go on the web and Simply CSL and see them all. So we rely on you too. We rely on membership, we rely on your ideas, we rely on your energy and your volunteer ability. So make sure you come to us. We need a lot of help for some of our projects, and we would love to help put you to work. So without much ado, though, I'm going to introduce Donna Storm, who is the business manager of FoodWorks for Middleway House. And she has done some absolutely wonderful catering for the Center for Sustainable Living. It's just a marvelous organization. It's one of the places that Judy Wicks would love to know about, because they are teaching women how to change their lives and be able to learn how to cook and do that as a business. So let's all welcome Donna Storm.
Well, thank you. And I really want to thank Patricia for all the hard work that she's put into bringing this place together. But I do manage FoodWorks for Middleway House. Middleway House owns 2 businesses, Confidential Document Destruction and Food Works for Middle Way House. Food Works has 2 kitchens, one on the way west side, where we prepare all the meals for the Head Start program, all the meals for the senior sites ran by Area 10 senior centers, and also for the Villages Child Care Center, which is a foster child care program. And then our other kitchen, which is just a couple blocks away from here, across from the post office, is where we have our special event catering kitchen going. So we're training women in 2 different kitchens, 2 different staffs. It's a real interesting life, I'll put it that way. And I'm working with women that are really survivors of domestic violence and trying to put their lives together. And economic independence is something that's very critical for that to happen, and it's an exciting program. And Middle Way House is a social entrepreneur when they're doing this, and I think it's because of what I do every day that I got so excited when I Googled Judy and read up on all the different things that you have done, and I found it very exciting. And well, the list is long. She's the owner and founder of White Dog Cafe. She's the national leader of the local economies movement. She's the co-founder of BALI, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies. She's the founder for the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia. And frankly, I got to this list on this one page, and you could just scroll down and scroll down and scroll down, and I was just amazed, all the awards that this woman has had, and she's earned them. Right now, Food Works and the Center for Sustainable Living and the local Growers Guild, Mother Hubbard's Cupboard, Blooming Foods, we're all very actively involved in the Growing Healthy Community group, where we're putting together at the Koch building, which most of you probably have heard about this, we're putting together a spot where there's going to be, the shelter's going to move there. By the way, Middle Way House is an abused women's shelter. I might not have made that clear earlier. The shelter's going to be there. There's going to be the kitchen, so no longer will I have 2 kitchens to go between. It's going to be great. It's all going to be in one place. But that kitchen is a community incubator kitchen, business incubator kitchen. And it's to help local businesses form, for us to help each other. And so, like I said, that's part of why I'm very excited to have Judy here. When I Googled her, I read an article in an old Orion magazine. It was written by Josh Harkinson, and he described how, as her restaurant grew, she really worked on developing the quality of the food and being considered about the sustainability of resources and using local resources. But also she decided, after reading about the horrors of an industrial hog farm, she stormed into her kitchen, scratched pork off the menu, and went searching for a farmer with a soft spot in his heart for pigs. That's a quote. And, well, when she went looking for meat wholesalers, she found Glenn Brindle, a farmer who delivered produce to the White Dog in his compact pickup truck. And he knew farmers nearby that were raising hogs the old-fashioned way. But he didn't have enough room in his pickup truck to deliver pork chops on top of the veggies he was already selling. So Judy gave him a low-interest loan to purchase a refrigerated cargo truck. That loan enabled him to deliver meat to more than 15 restaurants and caterers, and it created an entirely new market for not only that gentleman, but for the farmers that he was purchasing from. And that's part of what the local economies movement is about. Brindle's quoted in that article. He says, "Judy is an enabler. Without her encouragement and financial help, I probably wouldn't be doing this." I read that, and, well, he said enabler as if it was a good thing. And I'm coming from social services, and I'm always thinking of, the enablers and codependency issues that people bring to you. And then, this thing clicks in my mind, usually what our weaknesses are also our strengths. And this is a case of that. Enabling and codependence. Yes, they have the negative far into the spectrum, but enabling and codependence is actually what we want. We want to enable each other to do the best we can. We need to be codependent. I need to be able to go, as I did just this evening, to Matt at the Runcible Spoon and talk to him about coffee and sharing an order on coffee cups. We need to be able to come together and build that kind of codependency, and it's because of that I'm really glad that Judy's here. And when I followed Patricia into town tonight, I couldn't help but read her bumper sticker. It says, "Think good thoughts. Words become actions, actions become habits, habits become character, character becomes destiny." Well, Judy is an enabler, and she's an enabler whose words, actions, habits, and characters are building a destiny for all of us, and we can join in on building that destiny. And so I'd like you to please welcome Judy.
Well, thank you, Donna. That was a great introduction. And I want to thank Patricia and Lucille and Maggie and the Indiana Holistic Health Network for inviting me here. This is my first time to Bloomington, and I'm really impressed with all that's going on here. You know, your local Growers Guild and the Center for Sustainable Living, and I understand a lot of the restaurants buy from local farmers. And I heard that the Upland Brewery is giving their spent grains to a buffalo farm where they buy the meat, you know, for their restaurant, and that Lenny's Restaurant and Bloomington Brewery Company is going to be starting their own farm to grow their own produce. So that's all very exciting. So must be great to live in Bloomington. It's good to be here. There are so many challenges in our country today, from the climate change to the Wall Street financial crisis to the global food crisis to growing inequality and the rising cost of energy, that all point to the need for building a new economy, one that truly serves the needs of all people while protecting the natural environment. Last Tuesday night, after his victory speech, President-elect Obama proclaimed that America's strength comes not from the might of our military or the scale of our wealth, but rather from the power of American ideals of democracy, liberty, opportunity, and hope. Now is the time to build a new economy that exemplifies these American ideals, to transition from the old polluting economy of greed and exploitation and environmental destruction and despair, to a new economy that strengthens our democracy by bringing economic power to our communities from those faraway boardrooms through local business ownership. A new economy that brings liberty from our dependency on long-distance transport and corporate control over the food that we eat and the clothes that we wear and the energy that we use, by building self-reliant local economies. A new economy that brings opportunity for business ownership and meaningful jobs for those who have been left out of the old economy. And a new economy that brings the hope of sustainability, a healthy future for the generations to come. Today I'd like to tell you about a vision for this new economy, one we call the local living economy. We call it local because we call it local because it's locally based, and we call it living because it supports both healthy natural life and vibrant community life. An economy that can connect citizens across the political divisions of our country, a common ground for the left and the right. So tonight I'll tell you about my own business, the White Dog Cafe, and how that grew for me into a vision for this new local living economy. When I open my door in the morning, I see a sign that says, "Good morning, beautiful business." And it's a daily reminder to me of just how beautiful business is when we put our energy and our creativity and our care into producing a product or a service that we then offer to our community, something that our community needs. When I see that sign, "Good morning, beautiful business," I think of my own business and of the farmers out in the countryside that are picking organic fruits and vegetables to bring into town that day. And I think of the farm animals, the cows, the pigs, the goats, the chickens out in fresh air and sunshine. And of my goat herder, Dougie Newbold, who says when she kisses her goat's ears, it makes the cheese better, which I think is true. I think about the bakers coming into the White Dog early in the morning to put the pies and cakes and rolls and breads into the oven, and the maintenance crew coming in to make sure everything is clean before the guests arrive. I think about those Zapatista Indians down in Chiapas, Mexico, who grow the organic fair trade coffee beans that I'll enjoy in my morning cup of coffee. Business is about relationships with everyone that we buy from and work with and sell to, and a relationship with the earth itself. My business is the way that I express my love of life, and that's what makes it a thing of beauty. The first time I walked onto the street where I live and work today and where the White Dog is located, now, I was enchanted. It was a narrow, tree-lined street with these beautiful Victorian brownstone houses. And it was a little oasis in the institutional community that it was housed in. The University of Pennsylvania back then in 1972 was tearing down a lot of the old buildings and building these sterile high-rise dormitories and office buildings and strip malls and parking garages. In contrast, the lovely over 100-year-old houses on Sansom Street with a few small businesses on the first floor were more homey and inviting and friendly. So just after I moved into my apartment at 3420 Sansom Street and fell in love with my neighborhood, I learned that the whole block was condemned to be torn down, that they were going to tear down these houses and build a mall. And I just couldn't believe that these beautiful brownstones would be destroyed and the small businesses evicted and the neighbors evicted to make way for fast food restaurants and chain stores. So I was outraged, and I eagerly joined the community group in my neighborhood to start to work on saving our houses and our businesses. So at age 25, this was my first experience in community organizing. And of course, some people have ridiculed the work of a community organizer, but we knew all along they were wrong. And we knew that grassroots organizing is really the bedrock of democracy. You know, whether we're opposing a factory farm from coming into a rural area, we're opposing a coal burning plant, or we're opposing the demolition of an urban neighborhood. It's really community organizers that help citizens to come together to address and stand up to abuse of power and to work together to develop more meaningful institutions that really serve the needs of their community. So our group developed an alternative proposal to the shopping mall based on the work of Jane Jacobs, the extraordinary urban planner and activist who wrote Death and Life of Great American Cities. She talked about, she was saving her own community of Greenwich Village in New York City from destruction from a highway that was coming through. And in her book, she talked about the importance of mixed use, of mixing together retail and residential, where people can walk to work and walk to school, walk to leisure activities. And she challenged the urban renewal plans of the 50s and 60s, where whole neighborhoods were raised and which destroy these vibrant communities and local businesses to make way for the high-rise office buildings and housing projects. She also objected to the development of the suburbs that really made people dependent on cars to get to work or get to school. People no longer worked and lived in the same community. Work life and family life became very separate. Meanwhile, the same problem of separation was going on in the rural areas, where once farmers were growing a diversity of fruits and vegetables for local consumption, but then the corporate farms came in and planted acres and acres and acres of monocrops of just all, corn or soybeans or other types of crops, and the animals were taken off the pasture and put into factories where identical animals were kept in cages, also sort of separated from the land. So without these farms selling locally, consumers lost access to fresh local food and lost our contact with the earth itself. So today, most Americans no longer know who grows our food or who bakes our bread, who brews our beer, who makes our clothing, who builds our houses. We've become disconnected from each other and from our places, where once it was the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker who really formed the foundation of community life. In many towns and cities, we've lost our unique identity as streets are lined with the same chain stores that you see everywhere, or left deserted as the customers flock to the big box stores that are full of goods that are produced in sweatshops or factory farms. So without these direct relationships, few of us think about the consequences of our economic transactions on other people, on animals, on nature. So eventually, our community group won our fight to save our blocks from the wrecking ball, and this gave me the opportunity to buy my house. So I found my place in the world where I wanted to live and work and raise my family. So I chose my place, and I took responsibility for the well-being of my community, where I've now lived for over 35 years. So choosing a place and taking responsibility for it is the first principle in the local living economy movement. like the family farm and the family inn, the family-run store, I live above the workplace in the old-fashioned way, raising my family in the workplace. The Ms. Foundation started a program to try and address the separation of work life and home life by having a program that they called Take Your Daughter to Work. And I thought that was a great idea. The first, when I had my first child, I went back to work about 5 days after she was born and went to the restaurant, and I kept her up in the office during the daytime, and then the evening I'd put her on a piano, in a little basket on the piano. So after my first day of work, I locked up the restaurant, I went home, I got into bed, and I thought, I'm forgetting something. Oh my gosh, I forgot the baby. So I ran back to the restaurant and unlocked the door, and there she was, sleeping soundly in her little basket. So I realized for me, it's not a problem to bring my daughter to work, it's a problem to remember to bring her home again. So for me, home life and work life have always been interwoven, and so I naturally have the same values at work as I do at home. But physically separating home life and work life often leads to the compartmentalization of our values, and business schools actually teach their students to leave your values at home when you go to work. So when we're home, we teach our children the golden rule, but then when we get to work, gold rules. In many cases, industrialization has not only separated us from each other and from the land, but also has separated us from our deepest values. So living and working in the same community has not only given me a stronger sense of place, but a different business outlook. Making business decisions that are in the best interest of the common good comes naturally when I see those affected by my decisions, my employees, my friends, my neighbors, that I experience every day. At the White Dog Cafe, there's a short distance between me as the business decision maker and those who are affected by my decisions. As a small business person living and working in the same community, I'm more likely to make decisions from my heart as well as from my head when I think about what's in the best interest of all. I'll give you a couple examples of that. When I first heard about the idea of paying a living wage, which is the voluntary commitment on the part of a business owner to pay not just the minimum wage that's federally legislated, but what it actually takes to live in a particular community. And when I first heard about this, I had a business person's knee-jerk reaction. No one's going to tell me how much to pay my employees. Then one day I was in the kitchen, and it just happened to be that 3 young men looked up to me at the same time while they were peeling carrots or potatoes or whatever, and all of a sudden the light bulb just went off in my head. And these were 3 young men. They weren't just making minimum wage, but they weren't making $8 an hour, which is the living wage in Philadelphia at the time. And I thought to myself, what am I thinking? Of course I want anybody who works full-time at the White Dog Cafe to be able to pay their rent and buy their food and buy their clothes. What am I thinking? And so, of course, we instituted the living wage in our restaurant that everybody starts off after 3 months at $8 an hour. But that came about because of my personal contact, with the people that worked in my restaurant. Another example was my relationship with nature, that I had heard about climate change. I had heard about the availability of renewable energy, but I hadn't really been motivated to take action until there was a drought in Pennsylvania about 8 years ago. And I went up to the Pocono Mountains where I like to hike, and a little piece of paradise up there. And I came to Fern Hill, where there used to be these big, gorgeous green ferns kind of waving in the breeze up to my waist, and they were just all crumpled up like brown tissue paper on the floor of the forest. I got to the creek, and it was just totally dried up, and there's just this eerie silence as I walked through the woods with just the snapping of the twigs and the crackling of the leaves, and not even a bird was singing, and there was just a sense of fear in the air, a sense of the possibility of fire. And all of a sudden, I just felt it. I felt the stress of the woods, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is what it's going to be like. This is what global warming will be like when some parts of the world will have droughts and fires, and other parts storms and floods. And of course, we've seen that to come about more and more. And so I just went over to this big oak tree. I became a tree hugger. I hugged that tree, and I promised I would go back to Philadelphia and sign up for renewable energy. And as it turned out, the White Dog Cafe became the first business in Pennsylvania to purchase 100% of our electricity from renewable sources. But thank you. But that came about because I felt in my heart my relationship with nature, and that's what motivated me to act. When businesses continually grow larger and larger, that distance between the business decision maker and those affected by the decisions gets longer and longer until most CEOs never meet the people or the environment that's affected by their decisions. And of course, with publicly traded companies, by law, CEOs must make decisions in the best financial interest of their stockholders as opposed to all the stakeholders. Yet business schools teach grow or die, that bigger is better rather than small is beautiful, and success is measured by material growth. As a society, we're taught the false premise that economic growth benefits everyone, yet the continual growth of our economy is destroying the planet on which all life depends. By using up more natural resources than can be regenerated, and wealth inequality around the globe continues to increase. On top of all that, material growth has not made us any happier. Studies show that the height of that in the 1950s, when our communities started to be destroyed by urban renewal and the suburbs and so on, that's when happiness began to decline in our society. So that today we're less happy than we were 50 years ago and less happy than our European counterparts. Because success in business is measured by material growth, there was a time when I wasn't sure if I was successful or not, because people would hear that I was a successful restaurant owner, and so they'd come up to me and say, well, how many restaurants do you have? Well, just one. So for a while I worried about that, but then I realized that if I were to grow larger and do a chain of White Dog Cafes, that I would lose what was most important to me, and that's the authenticity of my relationships with everyone that I came into contact with in my business. So I came to understand that we can grow in different ways, that we don't have to keep growing materially, that we can grow by increasing our knowledge, we can grow by expanding our consciousness, we can grow by deepening our relationships, we can grow by having more fun and growing our happiness. As author activist Bill McKibben says, it's not about belongings, it's about belonging. And I first thought about that, about how it's not really material belongings, but belonging to a community, when I lived in an Eskimo village in 1969. I was a Vista volunteer just out of college, and I went to live in a remote Eskimo village in Alaska. And it was there that I saw a society that survived through cooperation and sharing and community, that this was the key to human survival. One spring morning, Eskimo women came knocking on my door. I opened it up, and she was saying, "Seal party, seal party, seal party," and she was beckoning to me. And I went out, and I saw all the women in the village walking across the snow carrying these buckets. And I followed along and found that the tradition in the village was that after a man catches his first seal after a long, hard winter, his wife has a seal party, and she invites all the women over to the house. And there the meat is divided between all the families. And then anything that the family has accumulated during the year that they don't need for survival is also distributed to the friends and other families of the village. The idea of hoarding more than one needed was unthinkable in the Eskimo culture. The Eskimos have no sense of envy. If I were to say, Patricia, I love that purple skirt you're wearing. If you were an Eskimo, you would take off your skirt and give it to me. So you have to watch out what you admire around. Please don't. I have done that sometimes, and people have taken off something and given it to me. It's kind of embarrassing. But anyway, they have no sense of envy. They want to share what they have, with each other. And then it made me think as a young person about how in our society that envy is actually created, by advertising, and that's what kind of drives our economy, that corporations spend billions and billions of dollars on advertising to make us feel envious, of the models in the movies, whether we're a woman who feels we have to get a new dress for the party or new lipstick or whatever, or a guy who needs to have a larger car or a certain kind of beer or a cigarette to be like the handsome models in the ads. That we're led to feel like we never have enough, that there's always something more that we need to be successful. In our society, we actually admire the ones who hoard the most, the ones that have the largest houses or multiple houses or many cars, the big gas-guzzling cars, or having a large wardrobe full of beautiful clothes. The Eskimos were the happiest people I ever had met in my life. They took just great delight in simply being alive on this beautiful planet. because their self-esteem and their sense of security was not connected to money and material goods, but rather it was about community, that their security and their happiness and their well-being came from their community. So often in our individualistic society, we're led to feel separate and alone, and that creates a them and us mentality where we are more likely to be fearful and to hoard rather than to love and to share. The Eskimos understood that all life is interconnected, that Earth's resources belong to all of us, and that if we share and cooperate, that will help us all to have a better life. They understood their place in the web of life. From the Eskimos, I began to see that a sustainable economy, one that had lasted for thousands of years, worked in harmony with nature and was based on cooperation and sharing rather than competition and hoarding. So at the White Dog Cafe, after reaching a financially sustainable size, I stopped growing the white dog physically and began to grow in new ways, to grow deeper through the many educational programs that we have at the cafe that build a sense of community and a sense of interconnectedness with each other and with our natural world. So education has become a product of the White Dog along with food and service. I'll give you a couple examples of that. We take our customers on solar house tours. We take them on affordable house tours. We teach them how to do energy audits of their houses, how waste veggie oil is used as a fuel. We go on a little trip where we see how the farmer collects the used fry oil from the restaurant, takes it out to his farm and uses it to heat his greenhouses and run his tractor, run his car, heat his house, all on used vegetable oil from the restaurants that he delivers to. We take our customers on tours of the farms, tours of prisons, on child watch tours that see the lives of inner city children. We have table talk speakers with people like Michael Pollan or Eric Schlosser, Peter Singer, Francis Moore-Lepay. Lester Brown is coming in January, who wrote Plan 2 and Plan 3 and 3.4 or whatever, all these different environmental plans. So we're looking forward to that. We have a monthly community service day. After Katrina, we took 35 of our customers and staff down to New Orleans to help with the rebuilding. Some people claim that my true profession isn't just that I'm a restaurateur, but that I use good food to lure innocent customers into social activism. So I'm kind of proud of that. We have many special dinners during the year coming up soon. We'll have our annual Native American Thanksgiving dinner, where we give thanks to Native Americans for the many foods in our diet, from corn and squash and tomatoes, potatoes, allspice, cinnamon. So many different things in our diet were originally cultivated by Native people over thousands of years. We have the Dance of the Ripe Tomato every fall, celebration of organic and humane farming, and just many different events, throughout the year. Another way we grow is by continually growing our business model, to continually add new business practices that are green. We have a Green Dog Day around Earth Day to say why the white dog is also a green dog, and we introduced new environmental practices. Last year we put solar hot water panels up on our roof to preheat the water for washing dishes. The year before, we put in a compost center and a recycling center that we share with other restaurants on our block. Recently, we stopped selling bottled water, that we sell only tap water, filtered tap water and carbonated tap water, and also encourage our customers to use canteens when they're traveling with water. We have a little gift shop, the Black Cat, where we sell all kinds of locally made crafts, fair trade crafts, and green products like water bottles, like compost canisters, and so on. During the debate and discussion about climate change and peak oil, there's often a focus on the cost and the hardship of moving towards a low carbon economy. But there's little talk about the benefits to our quality of life. We're not talking about going back to the Stone Age, but rather eating delicious local food in well-insulated houses where we gather with our friends and family, getting there by walking or bicycle or public transportation rather than congested streets. People go to farmers markets not just to buy food, but because it's fun to go to farmers markets and see your neighbors and feel good to meet the farmers. In her new book, Dancing in the Streets, Barbara Ehrenrich talks about the importance of collective joy and how it's often missing in our industrialized society, which she believes has caused depression. We come to think of a good time that we have to spend a lot of money, that we have to travel to some exotic place, but we can create more fun in our own communities rather than spending our money on expensive vacations. A customer sent me that book, Dancing in the Streets, because it reminded her of the White Duck Cafe and the many events we have where we dance in the street. One of those events was our 4th of July Eve party, where I did a skit called Birth of the Nation. And after we had our harvest dinner, summer produce dinner, I would do a little skit where first out the door would come our Revolutionary War soldier with a drum, the next a midwife with her lantern on, colonial dress, and then I would come out in my colonial dress with a clown face and a big beach ball under my colonial dress, and kind of groaning in labor pains as I went up the aisle. Would have about 200 customers outside under the tent, and I had a big double bed in the street, colored with red, white, and blue lights and blankets and whatnot. And as the midwife pulled back the covers for me to get in, as I turned around, you could see a sign on my back that said, "George Washington slept here." Then I would get into my bed and put my knees up into birthing position, and the midwife would say, 1, 2, 3, and the audience would say, "Push!" So under the bed, I pushed the beach ball down through this secret hole in the bed, and then the midwife, oh, there's my baby coming now. The midwife would deliver my babies, a white girl that said liberty, and a black girl that said justice, and all dressed in red, white, and blue, and they popped out from the hole in the bed and jumped onto the stage and did a tap dance to Yankee Doodle Dandy, and then we wheeled out the Statue of Liberty and sang "God Bless America." So, but that's the kind of fun that we can create in our own communities, and oftentimes it's local businesses. In my community, growing up in a small town, it was our local grocery store that put on the holiday party, and there was a parade and so on. So building a sustainable and inclusive local economy is not only about our responsibility to future generations, but it's about connecting with our place and with each other as we build community, creating local identity through local musicians and artists and creative entrepreneurs, and increasing happiness and collective joy that comes from working collaboratively toward a shared vision. I once had a vision of walking into a restaurant, instead of asking for a table for 2 or a table for 4, I said, I would like a table for 5 billion, please, a table for everyone in the world. Now I have to change that to 6 billion. But my vision was that everyone would have a place at the table economically and politically and have enough to eat. And this became the name of our International Sister Restaurant project, where we took our customers and staff around the world to countries that had poor relations with the U.S. government to try and demonstrate that it wasn't through military domination or economic domination that we achieve world peace, but rather than through dialogue and understanding. So we would go to different countries to study their food systems, and we went to Nicaragua. That was our first country during the Sandinista-Contra Civil War. Went to El Salvador, to Cuba, to the Soviet Union, to Israel-Palestine, and so we ate with the Zapatistas and the Sandinistas and the Viet Cong and the Palestinians and the Soviets. So we nicknamed our program "Eating with the Enemy." But our point was to help show firsthand U.S. citizens the effects of U.S. foreign policy on the lives of others. And it was through these travels that I began to understand more about the global economy and how we needed to help protect local economies and communities and natural environments around the globe rather than allowing corporate globalization to destroy them. When the Zapatistas had their uprising on the day that NAFTA went into effect, New Year's Day, 1994, I was really curious to find out why they had their uprising. So I went to Chiapas. I ended up going over 10 times over the next 10 years. I grew to understand that NAFTA, in order to comply with NAFTA, that the Mexican government had to change the constitution to open up the communal lands of the indigenous people to foreign exploitation. And I found that the Zapatistas had their uprising because they felt that this was going to be the death of their self-reliance, that when U.S. subsidized corn was allowed to come through with no barriers for trade, that would force their corn farmers out of business, and that's exactly what ended up happening. So last spring, when the global news of the global food crisis hit, where the rising prices of food internationally were leaving people hungry, I saw a photograph of a little girl from Haiti on the front of the New York Times, looking so vulnerable in this little tattered pink dress, standing on the top of a garbage dump looking for food. And I saw this as kind of a symbol of the crisis in our food system. And in the news, everyone was talking about, well, why are the prices high? Is it the drought in Australia that's making the wheat prices go higher, or is it because the U.S. is diverting corn to ethanol production rather than food, or is it because the Indians and the Chinese are eating more meat that's made the cost of food go up? But what wasn't really being properly addressed was the failure of the whole import-export system for food, where people around the world were dependent on large corporations to deliver basic needs, leaving us all vulnerable to the fluctuations that are inevitable in price for food. There was a time when that little Haitian girl would have been well fed by her own local farmers, the rice farmers of Haiti, but that was until U.S. rice farmers, subsidized with our tax dollars through the Farm Bill subsidies, started dumping cheap rice into Haiti, putting out of business all the rice farmers in Haiti. The same thing happened with the corn farmers in Mexico. The same thing happened with the dairy farmers of Jamaica. The same thing happened with the cotton farmers in Africa, all around the world. And the same thing happens with family farmers in our country, where the subsidized corporate farmers are putting out of business the local farmers and leaving us all vulnerable to these large corporations to bring us, our basic needs. The world now faces this historic challenge, perhaps the greatest ever, and that is of climate change. That's such a threat to life itself on Earth. And also of peak oil, that we've reached the peak of oil production, and the oil that's left is much harder to get to and not as high a quality, and so the price will keep going up and up until we eventually run out. Cheap oil has been the lifeblood of corporate globalization. That's what allowed large corporations to send food and clothing and building materials around the world unnecessarily. Studies have shown that the same amount of a certain product, whether it's potatoes or apples or ice cream or beer or bottled water, that goes into a country or into a state is the same amount that goes out. It makes no sense. The only ones that are benefiting from this are the large corporations, and the people and the environment are the losers. It was pointed out that Americans import sugar cookies from England, and the English import American cookies from America, and wouldn't it be better if we just exchanged recipes, rather than shipping these cookies, across the ocean? So the solution is clear, and it's a community solution that we must reduce shipping by developing a community self-reliance with local energy security, local food security, and small-scale local processing and manufacturing to produce basic needs locally. Building local living economies is not only a way to reduce carbon emissions and thereby address climate change, but it's also preparing us for a future that's going to inevitably be affected by climate change and peak oil. Ending our reliance on these long-distance supply chains that are going to be disrupted by adverse weather, social upheaval, and the rising cost of oil. So at the White Dog, we've been buying locally from local farmers for over 20 years, and we do that because the food tastes better, it's more nutritious. When food is bred to be shipped long distance to have a long shelf life and to be uniform in size for easier packing, what's bred out of the fruits and vegetables is the nutrition and the taste. So it's much more healthy and also more delicious to buy local foods. And we also buy locally because we want to have that direct relationship with the farmers, to have a sense of a community that brings the personal satisfaction of knowing who grows our food. We want to have transparency with all the scare about food, whether it's tainted meat or poisoned spinach or whatever. We like to know where our food comes from, to be able to visit the farms and see how food is raised. This also builds a stronger local economy and more self-reliance for our community, and cuts down on transport. The fewer food miles, the less carbons burned. For a long time, I knew about the importance of buying cage-free chickens and eggs but I didn't understand about the factory farming of pigs until I read John Robbins' book back in the 90s. And there I learned about this barbaric way that the sows are treated, kept in these small cages where they can't even move a step forward or backwards or turn around. They stand on cement their entire lives, where their manure goes into slots in the cement that then goes into a lagoon that goes on to pollute the water and the air. They never breathe fresh air, never feel sunshine. They're artificially inseminated. Their babies are taken away prematurely. Then they're artificially inseminated again as though they're a piece of machinery. And I was just appalled to read this because pigs are not machinery. They're mammals, like dogs, like us. They have feelings, emotions, like all mammals share, fear and love. And I felt that this was a breach of our duty of stewardship to farm animals, and a violation of nature to treat these mother pigs in this way. And at first I didn't know what to do because I realized that the pork I was serving at the White Dog must come from the system, because 95% of the pork in this country now comes from this factory farm system. So when I finally came to grips with it, I just came into the kitchen and said, okay, take all the pork off the menu, the bacon, the pork chops, the ham, that we cannot be a part of this evil system. And so we talked to the farmer who was bringing in our free-range chickens, and he was able to find a farmer out in Lancaster County that raised pork in a traditional way, where they rolled in the mud and slept in big pig piles, as pigs like to do. And so we started getting 2 pigs a week. And my chef had to learn how to cook the whole pig rather than just being able to order the bacon or the chops or whatever, which is a good thing. Then I learned about the plight of the cow. You know, how cows are herbivores. They're supposed to eat grass and clover, but yet because of the subsidized grains, they're taken off pasture and put into barns. And so we started finding sources for local grass-fed beef. And finally, I got to the point where I looked at my menu and I thought, well, I've done it. You know, all of our animal products come from small farms where the animals are raised with respect and kindness and naturally. And this is going to be our market niche, that no other restaurant in Philadelphia can say this. It's only the White Dog that does this. That this is all about us. And then I thought to myself, well, Judy, if you really did care about those pigs, and you really cared about the small farmers that were being driven out of business, and you really cared about the environment that was being polluted by this concentration of manure, and you cared about the workers in these horrible factory farms and slaughterhouses, and you cared about the consumers who are eating meat that's full of antibiotics and hormones, then rather than keeping this as your market niche, you'll share this information with your competitors. So it was at that moment that I realized that that it isn't enough to have good business practices in your company, that there's no such thing as one sustainable business, that we can only be part of a sustainable system. And so I had to look beyond my own company to see in what ways I could help to build that local economy, that local food economy. So that was a major turning point in my life. And as Donna mentioned earlier, I asked the farmer, would you like to expand your business? And he said yes. And I said, well, what's holding you back, from delivering the pork to more than one restaurant? He said he needed a refrigerated truck to do that. So I loaned him $30,000, and he bought the truck and started expanding his business. And then I started a nonprofit, White Dog Community Enterprises, and started putting 20% of the profits from my cafe into my nonprofit, and hired our first staff person, Ann Carlin. And it was her job to go around to the other restaurants in town and talk them into buying from local farmers. And that sort of began, our work. And since that time, we've started many projects with it. There's 10 employees now in our Fair Food project. We publish a guide to local eating for consumers and a wholesale one for chefs and store owners. We have a Fair Food farm stand in the Reading Terminal that buys from 90 different farmers. We have a farm to institution program to connect medium-sized farms with schools and hospitals and senior centers. And most recently, with partners, we started the Common Market, which is a food distribution business. 2 events happened in the fall of 1999 that made me realize that I even had to go beyond my own local economy to help to start a national movement for local living economies. The first event was the protests in Seattle against the World Trade Organization. And I didn't know anything about the WTO, and I didn't know the protests were coming, but my daughter was in college at the time, and so she told me all about this, and she went to the protests. And it was from her that I learned of the dangers of the WTO, that these corporations had rules amongst themselves that would supersede the democratically legislated laws in our local communities that would protect the environment and protect workers from corporate rule. And so when I saw Seattle, there I saw the farmers, the environmentalists, the professors, the students, the union leaders, but there was no voice of progressive business. Everyone was complaining about what we didn't want business to be. Everyone was complaining about corporate globalization, but no one was offering an alternative vision, of what business could become. Two days after Seattle, I got the news that Ben & Jerry's was sold to Unilever. And Ben & Jerry's had always been the leader in our socially responsible movement. And when it really finally sunk into me what was going on, I literally sat up in bed in the middle of the night and said to myself, my God, they've got Ben & Jerry's. And it was like a wake-up call. It was a kind of a 1-2 punch between Seattle and the sale that made me realize what was what was going on, that corporations were controlling more and more of our lives, and that even socially responsible companies like Ben & Jerry's, and it was from them that I had learned about the living wage. It was Ben & Jerry's that came up with the concept of measuring success by a multiple bottom line, not just by profit, but by how our business affected people and the environment. So even Ben & Jerry's was now being concentrated into more and more concentrated wealth and power. And when I thought about it, well, there was Cascadian Farms being sold to General Mills, there was Odwalla Juice being sold to Coca-Cola, and more recently, Stonyfield Yogurt being sold to Groupe Danone, the makers of Danone yogurt. Tom's of Maine being sold to Colgate, The Body Shop being sold to L'Oreal. I mean, the list goes on. That even socially responsible companies were spreading their brands across the country, putting out of business smaller companies, growing larger and larger and larger, and then consolidating into multinationals. So I realized that our responsible business movement that I had been a part of for many years was using the old paradigm of success, which was continual growth, that we are still measuring success by continual growth. And that we were neglecting three important issues. Appropriate scale. Rather than committing to continual growth, how could companies figure out what size actually maximize the relationships within their company, to maximize the relationships between people, and grew in other ways that were beneficial to their community and their environment. We were neglecting a sense of place, that these national brands had no connection to a particular place, to a particular community, to a particular environment. And we were neglecting the important issue of ownership, that democracy depends on having many owners, of having broadly decentralized business ownership, because that decentralizes power and wealth. The more owners we have, the more freedom we have. So that's why 7 years ago, in the fall of 2001, I co-founded BALI, the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies. And I started with a really simple premise, and that is that if we're going to have a sustainable global economy, environmentally, socially, and financially sustainable global economy, then it needs to be comprised of sustainable local economies. And rather than having this global economy that's with these big pockets of power around the world, we would have this intricate little web of small-to-small relationships around the world. In local economies, we produce locally as many basic needs as we possibly can. And then what we can't produce locally, we trade for in fair trade relationships around the world, relationships that benefit the local economies and local communities where those products originate. Not everything is made at home, and in fact, through local business ownership, we can create really unique products that are unique to our region because of our cultural or natural resources. A wonderful type of cheese or wine or fashion or music or art or a unique innovation that we can trade in the global marketplace, so that we're trading what really makes us unique as humans, rather than these big commodity trading of potatoes and corn that really could be grown, almost anywhere. The local living economy movement is connecting the dots between these important movements of sustainable local food, of green building, of new urbanism, community capital, renewable energy, alternative transportation, independent media, independent retail, local arts and culture, into a holistic vision for sustainable regional economies. So now Bali has over 60 local networks in the U.S. and Canada, comprised of almost 20,000 locally owned businesses. So we hope to see one develop in Indiana, maybe here in Bloomington. You have certainly the basic elements. And the way I started my network in Philadelphia, after I started Bali, which was at a meeting in California, I came home to Philadelphia and founded the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia. And I thought, well, now I have to demonstrate, how do you build a local living economy? So I started off by thinking about, oh, well, what are the basic needs? Food, shelter, clothing, and energy. And called these kind of the building blocks of a local economy, and then identified in my community, okay, well, who are the people that are working on local food? Who are the restaurants that buy local? Who are the grocery stores that buy local, or whatever? Who are the nonprofits that are working in this way? Who are the people that are passionate about renewable energy? Who are the people that are passionate about alternative transportation, green building, and so on? And get them together. And oftentimes people that are passionate about in one area, like they just love local food, aren't signed up for renewable energy. Or the people that are signed up for renewable energy aren't investing locally. So it's a matter of kind of connecting the dots between all these areas and getting them into the same room, and begin to build a board and have many activities that teach the whole community why it's important to buy local and why it's important to build sustainable local economies. So Bali has an annual conference. This year will be in Denver, May 21st to 23rd. So maybe some folks from Indiana would like to come and see how other communities have organized and hopefully get something started here. Buy Local campaigns is one of the most important programs that we have to teach our communities why it's important not only to buy local food, but to patronize independent local restaurants and stores, especially those who are selling locally made clothing or handmade pottery. There's been studies done that show that if you spend $100 at a chain store, only $11 stays within the community. But if you spend that $100 at a locally owned store, $45 stays circulating within the community. And that with charitable giving, that locally owned companies give 4 times a higher amount as a percentage of their business than corporate chains. There's also a big role of local government, that we need the partnership with local government. And oftentimes, city and state governments, as their economic development strategy, feel that the most important thing is to bring in large corporations, and they give tax subsidies to bring in these big box stores and chain stores and so on that are competing with the local businesses, instead of supporting local business ownership. So we need local government to align their economic development strategies with local self-reliance to help our local economies be self-reliant in food, shelter, clothing, energy. Another important aspect of our movement is around economic justice, that as we move from this industrial, global-based, corporate-controlled economy to local green economies, we need a lot of new businesses. We need more food businesses. We need more recycling businesses, more weatherization businesses, and so on. And so this is a historic opportunity to help those who have been left out of ownership in the old economy to gain ownership in the new economy. And so at Bali, we've launched an economic justice initiative to help entrepreneurs of color to gain ownership opportunity in the green economy. It's also important to invest locally. The financial crisis in Wall Street is kind of a wake-up call that why should we be investing in these in the stock market where we don't even know these companies and we don't even understand, where our money is going to. We need to reestablish the relationship between the citizen as the investor or the saver of their money with the business that loan or investment is going to. And by investing in local banks, local financial institutions, credit unions, and so on, we can do that. In Philadelphia, we're lucky to have what's called the reinvestment fund, and I have all of my savings in the local reinvestment fund. And that money is then loaned for affordable housing, for community centers, for wind turbines, the wind that is produced that we use at the electricity that we use at the White Dog comes from wind turbines that were financed by the reinvestment fund where my investment dollars went. So I call this getting a living return. When we invest in our own community, we gain not only a financial return, but a living return of living in a more sustainable and more healthy local economy. When I think about the challenge before us of peak oil and climate change, I think about these communities you see in a movie about a town about to be under siege or a huge storm, and everybody in the town is working together to pile sandbags up in front of the windows, the doors, handing a bag from hand to hand to hand to hand to pile them up to protect the community. The wagons are coming in from the countryside with supplies, for the coming storm or the coming siege. And that's, you don't see people competing with each other. It's all about cooperation, that everyone understands that we have to cooperate in order to survive. And there's this sense of urgency, and that's how I feel now, and that's what motivated me, in a sense, to become a cooperative business person, because I think that we are in a time of urgency. And I think this is also a time for national healing, to bring together the right and the left, conservatives and liberals, behind a common vision for a new economy that we can build together. Community self-reliance really offers a meeting place of the left and the right, as I see it, because liberals value community and collective endeavors, where they often undervalue the role of the self-reliant entrepreneur. And the conservatives value self-reliance and individualism, but they often undervalue the importance of working collectively and of community. So working together to build local economies that provide community self-reliance brings together the values of self-reliance, favored by the right, with the values of community, favored by the left. Community self-reliance is something that we can all commit to building together. Ours is a movement which can be embraced by all, a way of doing business that is not only beautiful in the loving relationships it brings, but essential to our survival in this changing world. So to summarize, the local living economy movement is about maximizing relationships, not maximizing profits. It's about growth of consciousness and not materialism. It's about democracy and decentralized ownership, not concentrated wealth. It's about a living return, not the highest return, a fair price, not the lowest price, sharing, not hoarding, simplicity, not gluttony, life-serving, not self-serving, partnership, not domination, cooperation-based, not competition-based, win-win exchange, not win-lose exploitation, family farms, not factory farms, biodiversity, not monocrops, cultural diversity, not monoculture, creativity, not conformity, slow food, not fast food, Arbucks, not Starbucks, R-Mart, not Walmart, valuing life over lifestyle, and as the Earth Charter says, being more, not having more. At its heart, the movement for local living economies is about love, and it's love that can overcome the fear that many may feel in the hard times ahead as we face the challenge of climate change, resource depletion, and environmental decline. In my own experience, it was my love of animals that motivated me to challenge the factory farm system and begin building a local living economy in my region. Our power comes from protecting what we love. Love of place, love of life, people, animals, nature, all of life on our beautiful planet Earth. And I would say, for the entrepreneurs amongst us, it's also about a love of business. Business has been corrupted as an instrument of greed rather than one of service to the common good. Yet we know that business is beautiful when we produce a product or service needed by our community. Our materialistic society has desensitized us to the suffering that underlies our industrial economic system. We're also desensitized by a false sense of masculinity based on control and domination over other people and nature. We need a more feminine, nurturing approach to life to bring forth the goddess in each of us, men and women both, reconnecting with each other, bringing care and compassion to our economy, and trust and harmony to our world. We must open our hearts and eyes and ears to hear the cry of the pigs in the crates, of the cow for her calf, of animals in laboratories in the fur industry, to feel the suffering of men, women, and children enslaved in sweatshops, in the rug industry, in diamond and coal mines, and in chocolate production, the suffering of migrant workers in slaughterhouses and pesticide-soaked industrial farms, the suffering of the people of Iraq, of Nigeria, of the rainforest tribes, everywhere where there is oil and natural resources to exploit and fight wars over. Let us hear the cry of the whales, of the polar bears, of the trees, of the coral reefs, of the natural world that is dying around us. What provides the energy and passion for all we must do in this movement is simply to allow ourselves to love what we love, and in so doing, find our place as humans in the family of life. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have time for some questions. If anybody would like to ask questions about the local living economy movement, about how to start a local network here in Bloomington, about the White Dog Cafe. Any questions out there? Yes, in the back.
This is sort of ridiculous. This is a completely personal question. Where did you live in Alaska?
I lived in Chafornik, which was near Bethel.
Okay, I was near Kotzebue.
Where?
Kotzebue.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that wasn't too far away. Yeah, the Alaska, there's a bump, and then there's a bump, and then there's the Aleutian chain, and we are the outside part of the lower bump across from Nunivak Island, almost on the mouth of the Kuskokwim River. So, other questions? Yes, Patricia.
I'd like to know what steps did you take to encourage the coming together of, say, the businesses that had resources with those who did not have the resources to develop this community business alliance?
Yeah. Well, we started with identifying leaders in each of these areas of food, energy, and so on to bring onto the board. And we started by educating each other. Like 1 month, the food people would have a talk about local food systems. What are the businesses that we had in a local food system, and what are the businesses that we need? How can people buy local food? Then the next month it would be a talk on renewable energy. What are the types of renewable energy that we have in Philadelphia, and how do you sign up for that, and so on. Then we started something called the Social Venture Institute, which was a learning event where emerging entrepreneurs could learn from more experienced entrepreneurs and from leaders in business service organizations. And so we started getting scholarships from the city. And right now we're in our this will be our seventh annual Social Venture Institute next week, actually. And last year we had 40% people, entrepreneurs of color, at our institute, and we're hoping to go over 50% this year. We're hoping that our business organization can eventually mirror the population of our city. We're not there yet by any means, and that's one of the big challenges of this movement, which is often the case in progressive movement, that when you look around and everybody looks the same, and you need to figure out consciously, how to have a diverse movement, because if the movement is not going to be diverse, it's not going to be successful. Is what it boils down to, that we can't get where we want to get in terms of an economy that's just and sustainable without including everyone. And so that has to be something that we think about in a very strategic way. And that's why we launched the Economic Justice Initiative at Bali to help do that. And how that's working is that we're identifying model businesses in our movement, a food processing plant, a company that installs solar panels or does weatherization, a recycling business, businesses in the area of health and well-being that are willing to share the business model. Because one of the beauties of local economies is that you're not competing nationally to have a national brand. So a business that's in Philadelphia could share their model with an entrepreneur in Bloomington because they're not going to be competing with each other. So we're developing a repository of business models where the entrepreneur is willing to share his business model, and also a core of entrepreneurs willing to mentor emerging entrepreneurs from historically disadvantaged communities. So we've just begun this. We're just in the process of identifying the mentors and the business models, and then working with our local networks on a way to identify the entrepreneurs that would like to apply for this help. We're also developing a capital pool, so that when we find minority entrepreneurs that want to start a green business or expand a green business, that we have the money to help them to get investment of capital into their business. So that's something that we're really focusing on now to try and build that part of our movement. Yes? the question is what's the relationship between our local business networks and local government? And of course that varies from place to place. In Philadelphia, our new mayor, Mayor Nutter, started a sustainability department, and we now have a director of sustainability for the city of Philadelphia, and he's actually reached out to our Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia to get advice. So we've been invited to be on it. He just started a local food advisory council, and I've been asked to sit on that, and a number of people in our Sustainable Business Network have been asked to sit on that. So we're really hopeful about that, and he's reached out to the green building folks and the renewable energy folks and so on. So we have a very positive relationship. But that varies from town to town. And it also varies in terms of the relationship between our local business networks and the traditional Chamber of Commerce in a particular city. In some places, the Chamber of Commerce is actually the Bali network, that they join Bali because they're so progressive and so understanding of the need to address climate change and promote green business, that they're actually become the business network that becomes a member of our alliance, the Bali Alliance. In other places, the Chamber of Commerce and the local network provide two options for businesses to join. One a more conservative path and one a more progressive one. But as much as possible, we try to work with a local Chamber of Commerce. In Philadelphia, we have a very good relationship with our Chamber of Commerce, and most recently, we've been starting to do programs together on sustainability, because I think now with climate change, that everybody's beginning to wake up, that we need to address this. This is a serious issue for all businesses, and so we've been doing educational programs with the Chamber and our Sustainable Business Network working as partners, which I think is a really healthy thing. Yes?
You mentioned Ben & Jerry's being taken over by Unilever, and you talked about Tom's, and after the fall, maybe you mentioned, I forget what juice company you mentioned.
Oh, Odwalla, uh-huh.
Okay, another organization or group of organizations that got taken over by profit-oriented organizations was all of the major co-op warehouses, Iowa City, Columbus, Ohio, Boston, Massachusetts. All of those got bought where they were cooperatively operated and became privately held organizations. And I'm wondering, are you saying that the reason that these new wave businesses eventually got eaten up by larger mainstream corporations is because they were still plugged into the competition level? Or why do you think those things that were heading in good directions kind of got defrayed and lost along the way?
I think it's because of the size, that they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And in the case of Ben & Jerry's, they didn't want to sell to Unilever. It was a forced buyout, because if you become public, and usually the reason that companies become public is because they, or always I think, the reason they become public is because they want the inflection of capital in order to grow bigger. And so once you become public, the law is that the board and the CEO have to make decisions in the best financial interests of their stockholders. So in the case of Ben & Jerry's, if Unilever offered a price that was higher than the market value of the stock, and Ben & Jerry's refused to sell, they would be sued, by the stockholders, rightfully so, because you have to, and that's part of what a forced buyout is about. But Jerry and Ben, as people, were very upset. They did not want to sell. Now, in other cases, I don't know the exact reason why all those companies sold. Oftentimes, it's the exit strategy. The entrepreneur is getting old, or they have investors that want to get paid back, and so they sell out in order to get the money to pay back their original investors and to retire or whatever. But to me, the problem is the size, that you just grow larger and larger and larger, and so you just have the centralized growing wealth and control. And then oftentimes whole industries become centralized. In food in particular, I forget the statistics, but take grain or something. There's only a few grain companies, own 80% of all the grain. Or I'm not very good at remembering statistics, but it's this growing concentration. So that's what I see as the problem. is that we measure our success by continual growth, and we go bigger and bigger until things just continue to consolidate. And we need to reverse that, to decentralize our food system, decentralize our energy system so that every community has local sources of renewable energy, and decentralize our media, so we have many sources of information. It's not just controlled by large corporations. Decentralized clothing making, everything. Decentralized culture. We're losing a lot of our languages around the world because there's a corporate monoculture that's based on English and white Western culture that's destroying a lot of cultures around the world. And so this is really all about decentralization and localization. And as you do that, what you're also decentralizing is wealth and power. So does that answer your question? Or?
Oh, only maybe starts to. Yeah, that helps.
Okay. Yes.
So, to build on that, then when White Dog had reached the size that you were satisfied with, was that when you made the decision to change its business format to nonprofit?
I didn't change no, the White Dog Cafe is a for-profit. I started White Dog Community Enterprises, which is a nonprofit. So there's two separate corporations. The White Dog continues to be a for-profit company. But I use a percentage of my profits from the for-profit to put into the nonprofit to run our programs there.
Do you feel that this is a good model for like a food business being a nonprofit? That there's a for-profit branch of it that feeds back to the nonprofit?
Well, I think there's many different models. I think that model worked for me. I mean, I definitely don't think that businesses should all be nonprofit. I mean, I prefer the for-profit world because, it's much more independent. Nonprofit, you have to have a board. There's all these laws that govern you. You got to deal with the IRS, regulations and so on. It's very cumbersome. And as an independent entrepreneur, I mean, I consider my business to be an art form in a sense. It's my individual self-expression. It expresses my taste, my values, my sense of fun, and is a way for me to express myself, in a way that I couldn't. Nonprofits are owned by the community. That's kind of the basis of them. You have to have a board that represents your community, and you're the caretakers for that money and for those activities that are of benefit to your community. And so, that's a great model too. But there's different. I think, there are nonprofit businesses, and that's a great way to do work as well. But it's much more collaborative and much more, and you don't own it, you don't control it, and so it just depends on what you enjoy. And there's many different partnerships and relationships between businesses and nonprofits, or among nonprofits. There's many different ways to address challenges in a community. So, yes, Lucille.
Was that some kind of a bank or?
The Reinvestment Fund. Yeah, it's a nonprofit local financial institution that takes investments from citizens and from schools and whatnot that invest there, and then they loan that money back out to the same community to finance small businesses and charter schools and community centers, affordable housing, and so on.
How do you start something like that?
Every community needs one. And this one in Philadelphia it's about 25 years old now, and it is a national model for this. The Calvert site, the Calvert Foundation has a community capital site, website, and you can go to there and put in your zip code, and it will tell you if there's any community capital financial institutions in your zip code area. So it's Calvert Community Capital, or if you Google Calvert Community Capital, you'll come to it. I mean, there might be one in Indiana. I don't know, but they're around the country. But even a local bank is important. In Philadelphia, I'm on the board of a new bank called the E3 Bank. It's called E3 to stand for Equity, Environment, and Economy. And so the idea is that we're creating a financial vehicle for people to invest in that's then going to invest in triple bottom line businesses. And it's going to be an educational bank that actually provides educational information to the businesses that get loans from the bank. So the idea would be to fund green building, and to favor businesses that have the triple bottom line, that measure success not just by profit, but by effect on society and the environment. And so that's what every community needs, to have some sort of financial vehicle like that. And what another problem is that IRAs and 401ks, right now, there's, as far as I know, there aren't appropriate vehicles for those. Like, I've been trying to get the reinvestment fund in Philadelphia to take 401ks. And they don't want to do it because it's a lot of extra work. There's a lot of paperwork, and you're dealing with a lot of different people and so on. It's hard to do. So most 401ks and IRAs invest in the stock market, and so it's very hard, not to do that. And that's something that has to change, and that's something that in our movement that we're working on to figure this out, because it needs to be that our savings go to work in our own communities. And if you don't have a local financial institution, there's no way to do that, unless you just individually loan money to, and people do that too, just take money out of your own savings account and loan it to a new bakery in town that needs some capital or whatever. But that's kind of hard to do for some people because it's hard to know if you're making a good investment. You need some advice, and that's what the financial institution can do, and to handle all that paperwork and transactions and so on. But how about in the back there?
Yeah, I was wondering, when you talk about these business models, mostly you talk about larger communities like Philadelphia. And how does that translate to a small community like Bloomington? And it's kind of a double question. It's not just about the size, but also I think often here what happens is kind of like there's preaching to the choir. There's a lot of people who are interested in starting up these kind of innovative communities, but there aren't enough customers out there to support it.
Well, we have volley networks in all different size communities. I happen to be from Philadelphia, so I use that as an example a lot. But Santa Fe is a much smaller town. I don't know how big Bloomington is compared to Santa Fe or Bellingham, Washington. Trying to think of some of the other. If you want, go on our website. It's livingeconomies.org. And you can punch on where it says find a network and punch on there. And then it lists everything by state, and you can see all the different size networks. Mendocino, California, Willits, California is pretty small. It was their Chamber of Commerce that actually joined. I think that they're probably smaller than Bloomington. I don't know for a fact. But anyway, I think we have more smaller networks from smaller towns and cities than we do from the large ones. Any other questions? It's a little dark out there, right there.
This is kind of devil's advocate. I'm just wondering, one of your last little phrases there was fair price, not lowest price. What would you say to someone who may advocate for the lowest price because they're strapped financially, they need the cheapest prices from Walmart, otherwise they can't afford this?
Right. I know that's a hard thing, but I think oftentimes we buy things that we don't even need. And I think there's a lot of people who go to Walmart and Target and whatnot that they don't think about why is that price low. The price is usually low because someone else is suffering. That it's done with sweatshop labor, that it's done in a way that degrades our environment, that there's losses that we're losing by. When there's a low price, we're often losing in other ways that we don't understand, that the world is losing, that people are losing, that the environment is losing, and that we have to raise consciousness about that. And I think that oftentimes people go to Walmart to buy cheap clothes that they don't even need. And I think we have to reevaluate the amount of stuff that we have. And I think even low-income people have clothes in their closet that they don't even wear. And that we think we have to have those sneakers, or we have to have that, gold chain, or, whatever it happens to be, when we don't really have to have it. And so, I think also that as a society, we need to honor wearing the same clothes a lot. I mean, I wear the same top, at least 2 or 3 times a week. And because I just, realize I'm just, want to model, that we don't have to always have new clothes all the time, and we can go to thrift stores. This country has so much leftover clothing that we don't know what to do with it. We ship tons of leftover clothing that we can't even sell in our thrift stores over to Africa and dump it over there, which puts out of business all the local dressmakers in Africa because everyone's going around wearing cheap U.S. clothes because we buy more than we need and then we just throw it out. It's just ridiculous. So I think we have to examine that first. And by supporting the Walmart system, we're supporting a system that doesn't pay their people. It's like a vicious circle. When we support Walmart, we're supporting underpaid workers that have no benefits and so on. So I think that whenever it's possible that we need to shop locally, that by buying something that's more expensive because it's locally made and it's from an independent store, it's more likely that that product, if it's locally made, as this is, as a hand-woven top, is going to last longer. When I was growing up, when I finished wearing clothes, my sister wore them. That's how everybody did it. It wasn't just poor people that did that. Everybody did that. And nowadays, it's not thought of that you would wear somebody's hand-me-downs. How horrible, But it's a cultural thing. We need to change, our measurement of success, our measurement of what's cool, and accept that we're using up too much stuff. I do think in terms of food, and this question often comes up with food, it's one thing to buy organic food. If you have money, you can go to Whole Foods or whatever, but what about people who can't afford it? Well, there I think that we have to change our government policy because we're giving subsidies to these large corporate farmers who are growing all this corn with subsidized dollars that's then used as sweetener in sodas and fat in animal feed that make fatty, sugary foods cheaper, and that's what we feed our kids in school lunches, and that's what the kids eat in the fast food restaurants because it's subsidized by our tax dollars. We need to move those subsidies away from unhealthy food to local fruit and vegetable farmers so that all citizens have access to fresh, local, organic fruits and vegetables. That's doable in our society. We have the money. We just don't have the will. And so there's just, I think, of many different things. They're just totally out of kilter, in terms of our values, in terms of our government, in terms of, where we put our money. That if we, and it takes a huge turning, takes the great turning, as Joanna Macy says, to really reorient ourselves. And I'm hoping with this change in administration, all of us are really counting on this helping to have leadership in Washington that will help to change things and not be so influenced by lobbyists and big corporations. But that is an issue. I agree it's an issue, that low-income people have a hard time buying things that are more expensive. Any other questions? And how about in the front row?
What happens to the white dog after you're gone?
Oh, the question, what happens to the white dog after I'm gone? Well, that's an interesting question because I'm going through that right now. I'm in my 60s. I was hoping that my daughter was going to be interested in taking my place, or my son, but neither of them are interested in the restaurant business. Then I was hoping that I could sell it to my staff, that there would be enough leadership there that the staff could buy it. And I looked into an ESOP where you sell the restaurant to your employees. But I realized that the problem's not ownership, it's leadership. And I've been working on trying to cultivate the leadership from within, and it's just not working. So now I'm looking for another entrepreneur to sell the business to, someone that shares my values and can keep the White Dog going for the next 25 years. And I'm kind of in the process of doing that right now. Any other questions? In the back there, I can see a hand up.
Yeah, I was real curious how you managed to accomplish having a White Dog Cafe using only renewable energy. How do you work that out?
Well,
How do you know it's all, I think you have wind-based energy
yeah.
that you supported and that your business that entirely uses that kind of.
It's just the electricity. It's only the electricity. And it's because our dollars, when we draw electricity from the grid, the electrons in the grid are all mixed together, whether it comes from wind or coal or nuclear or whatever. But when we draw those electrons down and use them in the White Dog, the dollars we pay to refill the grid with electricity go to the wind companies. And that.
How would that arrange? How do you do that?
Well, I don't. It varies from place to place. Pennsylvania and California were the first states to be deregulated, that allows businesses and consumers to choose alternative energy. I don't know what the state is in Indiana. I mean, you have to have the wind turbines available, to buy from. And I don't know. Do you have wind turbines in Indiana? I don't know.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
There's some
And can you, on your electric bill, can you sign up for alternative energy? Yeah, so you can, it's more expensive. I mean, I had to pay, I think it was $7,000 more a year. It came for me to buy renewable energy, but I felt that was well worth the money, you know, because our mission is not to maximize profits. Our mission is to be of service in 4 areas: serving our customers, serving our employees, serving our community, and serving nature. So to be able to buy renewable energy is accomplishing our mission of serving nature. So, you know, to me, it's not just about what's going to make the most money in the short run, but about how can we better serve in those 4 areas. So that's the rationale by which I make decisions. And yes, you have to make a profit. If it was going to cost me $50,000 more a year, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But $7,000 is not that bad, you know. And over time, the more people invest in renewable energy, the more the price will go down, because the more the companies can grow that are providing renewable energy. So for me, it was really important that as soon as it became available in Pennsylvania, that people support it, they sign up and so on, because that strengthens that renewable system. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit more about crystallizing instincts, the respective instincts of Democrats and Republicans around the issue of sustainable local economy? You mentioned that Democrats feel for the community while Republicans feel for self-reliance. So it's a time for national healing. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, the question was around a national healing of bringing together the right and the left of Democrats and Republicans. And you know, the example that I did give was that in general, traditionally conservatives are into the individual self-reliant entrepreneur, where the liberals are more into collective effort and community. And you know, the problem with the liberals is oftentimes they don't respect the entrepreneur. You know, and I found that before. Many times myself, and the conservatives often don't respect the cooperative effort. So to me, this is a way of bringing together those 2 energies of seeing that self-reliance isn't just an individual, but self-reliance is a community, and that true self-reliance comes by working cooperatively to build self-reliance for the whole community. That just as I discovered when I shared my sources with my competitors, that I couldn't build a local food system, that one restaurant buying from local farmers isn't going to do anything, and that my long-term security was dependent on the local food system, on making the farmers healthy, and the only way to do that is by working cooperatively to get all the restaurants to buy from the local farmers. So it's understanding, as the Eskimos did, that our survival depends on communal effort. And unfortunately, under capitalism, a lot of the times that community collaboration, collective effort, whatever you want to call it, is synonymous with socialism and communism. And we saw that in the campaign with Obama, that people were saying, well, he's a socialist, he's a communist, because he's talking about sharing the wealth and cooperation and so on. But it's about bringing it's making people understand that we have to work together, as the Eskimos did, to survive. And I feel that now, in this urgent time of climate change, that this is the time where we're going to wake up and say, hey, it's true, we have to work together. And I remember Martin Luther King said that we can either choose community or we can choose chaos, that now is the time. And I think that's the time that we face right now, that we can, if we don't cooperate, if we are all about ourselves and competing and hoarding, you know, as climate change and environmental degradation makes things harder and harder, we can take the path of fear, a fear-based path of hoarding, competing, or we can take the path of cooperation and love and sharing. And we're going to see both, I'm sure. But I think that it's really important that we start building new institutions now that are based on sharing and cooperation and love and compassion before things get worse. Because, you know, I feel that things are going to get worse, and there's going to be a lot of fear, that people are going to need to know where to turn. And so what we're trying to do in this movement is to get things started, whether they're food cooperatives and farmers markets and so on, alternative energy, that people have a place to go to. They have a place to work with others, to join with their neighbors and so on, to build local self-reliance that can weather, you know, what's coming. And we don't really know what's coming, what climate change is going to bring. But we need to work in community, and that it's not as I said earlier, it's a good thing, that I think there's a lot of unhappiness, in our society because we are so separate, because we are so competitive, because we are so materialistic, and that this is something that I look to as a good thing to happen. That through these hard times, we're going to turn towards each other, and in doing that, we're going to find greater happiness by forming stronger communities and appreciating the creativity that we have in our own neighborhoods that we often overlook. Good. It's so dark back there that I can't see very well. Is there a hand up in the back? There's one here, yeah.
As you're approaching one of these businesses, since you're looking towards one of the smaller entrepreneurial businesses, I'm curious, two things. How are you convincing them? Is it more on just the moral imperative, it's the right thing to do, or are you selling them on it's just the community, or lower costs, or they're saving money by saving energy? And then what challenges they face as they actually try to do this for the first time?
The businesses you mean?
Yes, that you're approaching.
Right. Well, what we do is we're not judgmental. That anyone can join the local networks unless you're publicly traded. That's the only exclusion, because publicly traded companies aren't free to make the types of decisions we need to make. But any type of business can join. You don't have to be signed up for wind power or buying local or whatever. And we want to have a big tent. And the buy local campaigns tend to be the best way to bring people in because it's about increasing sales. And businesses, like I remember we approached the hardware store in my neighborhood to be part of our buy local campaign. And he said, okay, I'm going to join, Judy, but you better not start talking negative about President Bush. Like he didn't want it to be political, because he was a Republican and he didn't want to hear about green. He didn't want, but he believed in independent local businesses. And that's the common denominator. And that's another common denominator that brings together the right and the left. A lot of independent small business people are conservative. They're Republicans and have been for generations. And so even here, this is a way to bring together the conservatives and the liberals, through their commitment to local independent business, the small business, that we have a common adversary, and that's the large corporations. And so, in Philadelphia, a number of coffee houses, for instance, got together because they realized they're not competing with each other; they're competing with Starbucks. So they started working collaboratively, and they formed a collective of all the, I think it's about 8 different independent coffee.
Attention library patrons. The library will close
Uh-oh.
in 15 minutes.
They're going to kick us out.
Please gather your materials and take them to the checkout desk on the first or second floor. Patrons using library computers are a few minutes before closing. Thank you for coming to the Grove.
So anyway, so these coffee, one of the cute things they did is that it takes a lot of money to print your logo on a coffee cup, and of course Starbucks has their logo printed on theirs. So the independent coffee houses got together and they printed all their logos, like 8 logos on the cup. So they could by pooling their efforts, they could print enough. So they were all advertising each other's coffee houses, and they could afford to buy these cups. So there's a lot of ways that the small businesses can come together to help each other, and so that's kind of how we attract the businesses. The number one thing is we want to save independent businesses in this country. From competition. We want to save the local family drugstore from the competition from the CVS or the Thriftway, and we want to save the local hardware store from competition with Home Depot. And so there you find all different types of business people. So we don't even talk about green or whatever. We try to bring them in, and then through the different discussions and so on, that they begin to learn more, and learn that often green practices save money. That it's an economical thing. When I put the solar hot water panels up on my roof, or evacuated tubes, that cuts down on my natural gas. And my natural gas is natural gas. I mean, it's not a renewable source. Unlike electricity that can be generated by wind, natural gas is like oil. It's a non-renewable source that burns carbons. And so I'm trying to reduce my use of natural gas for environmental reasons, but it also is to cost me less. And that eventually, within 5 or 6 years, I'm going to be able to pay off what I spend on the solar hot water installment because my gas bills would be lower. And so, again and again, you find that's the case, and maybe not in the very beginning. I mean, composting and recycling, all these things, it's kind of a struggle to get them all set up. But in the long run, you end up saving money because you're reusing things, and so on. And I think that's the case with so many green practices, that you end up saving money in the long run. So that's how we do it. We start with things where we have common ground, and then try to educate people in a gentle way and not be judgmental. And that we understand that sustainability is a journey, that no one is really finished, and no one is done, like no one is, gets an A, because there's always something more that you have to do. And so we need to feel like we're on this journey together, and that no one's going to say, well, I do more than you do, or whatever. Well, should we stop because they're going to kick us out? All right, thank you. Thank you.
I want to say thank you very much to Judy because everything that she spoke about is near and dear to my heart. And I want to say, please, if you're going to the wonderful dinner tomorrow night that's being presented by the local Growers Guild, please go by Blooming Foods or Wandering Turtle and pick up your tickets before the evening. You can look in your publications that you have to see the complete menu, or you can visit the website. Also, on Saturday, you'll see in the publication there's over, I think, about 24 different workshops, many of them dealing with local food, aging well, and then the Healing Sound concert at the end of the day, which is, I think, will be very wonderful. Please check out the resources, the Local Food Network, which has a listing of locally owned food resources, wineries, brew houses, resources for people in need of food services, and the list is extensive. There's resources about gardens and gardening, and just there's a lot of information in the publication, so visit all the websites, talk to people, and thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you.